I need to tell you something I've never said out loud to anyone. Not to my wife. Not to the therapist I saw for 3 months after everything happened. Not even to my brother, who was there for part of it. I need to tell you about the cabin. My grandfather built it in 1961, somewhere on the 40 acres of forested land our family has owned in northern Vermont for as long as anyone can remember. He built it alone, which was strange. Daniel Mercer was a man who never asked for help, but he also wasn't the type to do physical labor without an audience. He liked being observed, doing good things. The cabin burned down in 1987. My father told me that. He said he watched it go up from the tree line. That the structure caught fast because of how dry that autumn had been. And that by the time anyone thought to call the fire department, there was nothing left. Just a black scar on the ground, and the stone chimney standing there like a gravestone. I was 4 years old. I don't remember it. What I do remember is that this summer I turned 12. I was riding my bicycle through the property's back trail and came through the tree line into the clearing near the creek, and the cabin was there, fully built, intact. A little weathered, but solid. Like it had stood there my whole life. I told my father that evening at dinner. He put down his fork. He looked at me for a long moment. In that way he had completely still, like something inside him had gone cold. And then he said, "You're confused, Daniel. You must have found someone else's property." I knew our property line. I had walked it dozens of times. I didn't argue. You didn't argue with my father about things that happened near that clearing, but I went back the next morning. I wanted to see it again. The cabin was still there, and the front door was slightly open, as if someone had just walked out. I should have kept riding. I thought the cabin had burned down years ago. My grandfather told me he watched it burn himself, but every winter, without fail, it comes back exactly where it stood. And every time it appears, someone from our family disappears. I didn't go in that first time. I was 12, and I was afraid in a way you're afraid when something is wrong with the world, but you cooey and explain why. Not the fear of something jumping out at you. The fear of something being exactly where it shouldn't be. I went home and I didn't talk about the cabin again for 3 years. When I was 15, my grandfather Harold came to stay with us for the month of January. He was 71 then, and still one of the most formidable men I'd ever been in a room with. He was the type of person who made you feel observed, like he was always running a quiet calculation about you that he would never share. We were alone one evening, the two of us sitting by the wood stove while my parents were out. He was reading. I don't know why I brought it up. Maybe it had been sitting in me for 3 years and I needed it out. I said, "Grandpa, I found the cabin. Back near the creek?" He didn't look up from his book. He turned a page. "Did you go inside?" he asked. "No." He nodded slowly, still not looking at me. "Good boy," he said. And then nothing else. I waited. He kept reading. I said, "Dad told me it burned down." Harold looked up at me then. His eyes were pale, like mine. I had always been told I looked like him, and in that moment, I hated that. "A lot of things burn down," he said, "and come back. That's the nature of things that matter." I didn't know what that meant. I still don't know, entirely. But he said something else before he went back to his book. He said it quietly, almost like he was talking to himself. "The cabin is for the people who need to understand something they can't understand anywhere else. It was built for that. It will always come back because it needs to." I was 15. I let it go. I spent 20 years letting it go. Then, last winter, my grandfather died at the age of 6. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was back on that property to settle his estate. And when I walked through the tree line near the creek at dusk, the cabin was there again, exactly as I remembered it, exactly where it shouldn't be. Have you ever heard the legend of the winter cabin? Deep in the forests of northern Canada, there's a story whispered among locals about a small, isolated cabin that holds a chilling secret. It's said to appear only during the harshest winters, blanketed in snow, with a thin wisp of smoke curling from its chimney, as if someone is inside, waiting. For centuries, travelers and hunters have reported seeing it, a cozy little refuge in the middle of a blizzard, promising warmth and safety. But those who have tried to find it the next day are always met with disappointment. The cabin is gone, vanished without a trace. No footprints, no leftover firewood, nothing. just an empty clearing in the snow. Some say it's the ghost of a lonely trapper, forever seeking company. Others believe it's a doorway to another world, one that only opens when the temperature drops below freezing. Old maps of the area don't show any structures where the cabin is sited, and official records have no mention of it ever being built. So, what is this phantom cabin? Is it a mass hallucination brought on by the extreme cold? A local legend passed down through generations? Or something truly unexplainable? The mystery remains as cold and deep as the Canadian winter itself. What do you think is going on? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more strange stories. My grandfather always told me the cabin burned down years ago. He said he watched the flames himself, but that wasn't true. Every winter, like clockwork, it reappears, standing right where it always stood, and every time it comes back, someone from our family vanishes. I found his notebooks. They were meticulous. My grandfather, Daniel Mercer, was a careful man, and these notebooks proved it. The first one starts in 1961, when he built the cabin. The writing is clinical, full of measurements and materials. But then, it changes. He starts documenting people, using only their initials. He wrote that I visited in 1963 and came to understand what was holding him back. M stayed for 3 days in 1965 and left with a clearer sense of what she owed the family. The language sounds like a therapist's, but the reality was much darker. Harold used the cabin to isolate people, to influence them. He'd bring a struggling nephew, a distant daughter-in-law, a rebellious cousin, always under the guise of helping. People said talking to Harold was transformative. You'd go in confused and come out with a new sense of purpose. The notebooks explained how he did it. He had a system. He'd ask careful questions to map out a person's fears, their guilt, their sense of obligation. Then he would talk for hours, subtly reframing their own memories and values until they were completely reordered. He never threatened, never raised his voice. Just talk. Then I found my father's initials, W. 6 visits, starting in 1979 when he was just 22. The final entry read, W is ready. He will not cause problems again. I closed the notebook, the words chilling me to the bone. Now I have to know what happened in that cabin. What did my grandfather do to my father? And who will be next? Thanks for watching. If you want to follow this investigation, make sure to subscribe. I sat in that cabin reading for 4 hours. By the time I reached the notebooks from the 1990s, the initials had been replaced with full names. Harold had apparently stopped worrying about the record being found, or perhaps he had started wanting it to be found. By someone specific, by me. Because my name appeared in those notebooks, not as a subject. Not as someone Harold had brought to the cabin and worked on. As a candidate, in a 1998 entry I would have been 8 years old, Harold wrote. Daniel is the one who will understand this work. He has my temperament, he observes without revealing himself. He waits. There were 17 entries about me over the following 20 years. Harold watching me at family gatherings, noting specific things I said or did, cataloging my behaviors in the same clinical language he used for the people he brought to the cabin. He had spent my entire life studying me, and he had never told me. Then, I reached the final notebook, dated 14 months ago. The final entry was 8 months before he died. His handwriting was shaky. It read, I never brought Daniel to the cabin. That was intentional. If he needed to be brought, he was the wrong choice. The right person finds the cabin themselves. He has found it. Hello, Oliver, no, that. He will find it again when I am gone, and when he does, he will understand not what I did but what he is capable of doing. I do not believe I am wrong about Daniel. I closed the notebook. I sat there in the dark, the fire burning low, and thought about my own life, the conversations I had steered, the way I had always known how to wait for someone's most vulnerable point and then press gently. I thought about my wife, how I'd made her believe it was her idea to stop seeing a certain friend. I put the notebooks back in the box, stoked the fire, and stayed the night. I drove back to Burlington the next morning. On the way, I stopped at a gas station in Calder Falls, the small town closest to the property. An older man was working the register. He looked at me for a long moment and then asked, "You, Harold's grandson?" I said yes. He nodded, his expression careful, not hostile, but like he was deciding whether to be honest with me. He said, "The cabin's back, isn't it? Saw smoke up on that ridge last night." I told him I'd stayed there. He was quiet for a bit while ringing up my coffee. Then, very quietly, he said, "Your grandfather brought my wife up there in 1994. We were having trouble, the kind every couple has. He said he wanted to help her think through some things. She was up there for 2 days. He handed me my change. When she came back, she wasn't angry at me anymore. I thought that was a good thing. It took me about 3 years to figure out she was unangry because she'd stopped feeling much of anything at all. I just drove home after that. That evening, I called my uncle, my father's younger brother. He's the one who always seemed a little off, like a radio station not quite tuned in. He's 61 now, never married. He worked for my grandfather's business for 30 years, on a salary that should have been comfortable but somehow never was. I asked him, "Did Grandpa ever take you to the cabin?" There was a long pause. "Why are you asking me that?" I told him I'd found some of Harold's notebooks. Another, even longer pause. "He took me when I was 19. My uncle sighed. "I had told him I was thinking about moving to Portland. I had a job offer, a woman I liked. I went to the cabin for one night and by morning I had decided to stay and work for him." "Do you know why you changed your mind, Primera?" "Ask it." My uncle was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "No," he finally said. "I never understood it. I just woke up and the right answer seemed obvious. I asked if he regretted not going to Portland. Every day of my life," he said. Then, honk, up. I sat there, phone in my hand, thinking about my grandfather's notebooks, about his language, and that phrase he used over and over. "Became ready." I thought the cabin had burned down years ago. My grandfather told me he watched it burn himself. But every winter, without fail, it comes back exactly where it stood. And every time it appears, someone from our family disappears. I drove to my father's house the following Saturday. He is 67 years old. He has lived in the same house in Montpelier for 31 years. He has, as long as I can remember, been a man of rigid routine, same meals, same chair, same route to the hardware store on Saturday mornings. A man who had reduced his life to a set of controllable variables. I understand that differently now. We sat in his kitchen. He made coffee. He moved with the careful efficiency of a man who had long ago learned that efficiency was a form of safety. I told him about the cabin, about the notebooks, about what I had read. He sat across from me and listened without expression. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I know." Just that. "No," I said. "You know what he did to you." He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "I know what he did. I have known for about 15 years. I didn't understand it while it was happening. I was 20, and your grandfather was the most impressive person I had ever met. And when you're with someone like that in a room for long enough, their version of reality becomes the only one that makes sense." I asked him what Harold had changed in him. My father looked out the window. "I had a scholarship to study law at McGill," he said. "Full scholarship. I was going to go, and then I spent 4 days in that cabin with your grandfather, and by the end of it, I had decided law wasn't right for me. I was going to stay in Vermont, work the land, marry the woman he had introduced me to." He said it without accusation. That was the most disturbing part. 30 years later, it was just a fact he had filed somewhere and sealed. "He took it from you," I said. "Yes." "And you never said anything. You never went back to try to get it back." He looked at me then. his pale gray eyes, my grandfather's eyes. "Daniel," he said, "by the time I understood what he had done, your mother and I had been married for 12 years. You and your brother were children. What was I supposed to dismantle?" He drank his coffee. "I want to ask you something," he said slowly, "and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Okay, why did your grandfather leave the land to you specifically?" I already knew the answer, and I think he already knew I knew. I went back to the cabin 3 more times over the following 2 months. I told myself it was to read the remaining notebooks more carefully, to understand the full scope of what Harold had done, to document it, maybe to understand it as a researcher would understand it, with some distance. I told myself a lot of things. The truth is that I started doing something in the cabin that I haven't been able to fully explain to myself. I started writing. Not about Harold, not a record of what I had discovered. Something else. I started writing about people in my life, the same way Harold had. Their patterns, their vulnerable points, the things they wanted that they hadn't said out loud, the gap between who they believed they were and who they were actually being. I wrote about my wife, Sarah, about the way she needs approval before she trusts her own judgment, about the 3 or 4 specific fears she has that she thinks are private. I wrote about my colleague at work, a man named Ro who has been quietly trying to take over a project I've been running for 2 years. About his insecurity, about the specific type of praise that makes him lower his guard. I wrote pages. It came, I realized with a cold clarity sitting in that cabin on a February night. The way things come, easily, when you've been doing them unconsciously your whole life. Harold hadn't taught me this in the cabin. He hadn't needed to. He had recognized it in me when I was 8 years old and simply waited for me to find the notebooks that would show me what I already was. That's what the cabin was, at its core. And once you saw that version clearly enough, you had no choice but to become it. He had done it to my father, to my uncle, 2 dozens of people over 60 years, and now he had done it to me. The difference is that I could see the mechanism. I understood exactly what was happening. I told myself that made it different. I told myself understanding something is the same as resisting it. I have since come to believe that is the most sophisticated lie my grandfather ever told me, the one he didn't even have to say out loud, because he knew I would tell it to myself. I drove home from the cabin that night. Sarah had dinner ready. I sat down across from her and I looked at her the way my grandfather looked at people, and I noticed things. I thought the cabin had burned down. My grandfather swore he watched it burn. But every winter, it comes back right where it stood. And every time it appears, someone in our family vanishes. My wife, Sarah, she's sharp. She knew something was wrong. After my last visit to the cabin, she looked me in the eyes and said, "Something's changed. Tell me what it is." I almost did accused to the tricks my grandfather taught me, the words that manipulate without revealing, but looking at her, seeing her fear, I just couldn't. It felt monstrous. So, I told her everything. The cabin, my grandfather's twisted legacy, the disappearances. When I finished, she just said, "I know." She'd felt my manipulation for years, but stayed, hoping it was worth it. Now, she wasn't so sure. She left. I went back to that cabin, burned all my grandfather's notebooks, and sat in the dark. He would have known exactly what to say to get her back. The scary part is, I think I do too. Sarah came back after a week. We have been in couples therapy for 4 months. The therapist is a careful woman who asks good questions. Sometimes, when she asks a question in a particular way, I recognize the technique. I see the architecture of it. The way she's mapping vulnerability, the way she's creating a gap for insight to enter. I can see the whole shape of it from the outside. I haven't told her. I can see it. I'm not sure whether keeping that to myself is privacy or something else. That's the thing I live with now. The permanent uncertainty about my own motives. Every time I say something well-timed or effective, I stop and ask, was that natural or was that chosen? And then I ask, does the difference matter if the outcome is the same? My grandfather would have said the difference doesn't matter. He was a man of outcomes. I've burned his notebooks, and I still hear him very clearly. The land is still mine. I haven't sold it. I've told myself I will sell it in the spring, that I'll have it surveyed and listed and I'll cut the connection. I've told myself that for 4 months, I haven't called a real estate agent yet. My brother called last month. He's going through something difficult. A divorce, financial problems, the particular desperation of a man who doesn't know who to talk to, he said. You always know how to help me think through things, Danny. Can we get together? I said yes. I suggested we meet somewhere quiet. We haven't set a date yet. I've been thinking about where would be best. I need you to understand that I'm aware of what I'm telling you. I know how this sounds. I know what the sequence of thoughts I just described looks like from the outside. I am telling you anyway, because I think this is the only way to hold myself accountable to say it out loud to someone, even to strangers, even in a format that feels abstract and removed. My grandfather never told anyone. He kept everything in notebooks, in a locked box, in a cabin. He'd convinced everyone had burned down. I don't want to be that. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not that already. The cabin is still standing. I checked last week. There's no reason for it to still be standing. There never was. And yet some part of me, the part that sounds most like Harold, finds that completely unsurprising. Of course, it's still there. It always comes back. That's the nature of things that matter.